Welcome to all of you to our final TMC seminar of the spring semester. We're really glad that you're here with us today. It's my pleasure to introduce our seminar speaker for today, Dr. Matt Rubach. Dr. Rubach is an associate professor at Duke University in the Department of Medicine, Division of Infectious Diseases and International Health, as well as an associate research professor at the Duke Global Health Institute. From 2012 to 2022, with 1 year of hiatus, he and his family were based full-time in Moshi, Tanzania, where he also worked as a consultant doctor at the Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Centre, or KCMC, in the Department of Internal Medicine. Since 2015, Dr. Rubach has served as the co-director of Duke's Health Research Unit at KCMC, the KCMC Duke Health Collaboration, and medical director of the collaboration's clinical research laboratory. His research, which is funded primarily by the U.S. National Institutes of Health, but also by the Gates Foundation, focuses on the epidemiology, etiology, and management of febrile illness and sepsis. This includes One Health research on zoonotic infections, as well as translational medicine projects aimed at characterizing subtypes of sepsis to inform optimization of sepsis management strategies. Since 2012, he's mentored 16 medical trainees in clinical epidemiologic research in Tanzania, both Tanzanian and US mentees across the training spectrum from medical students and residents to fellows and postdoctoral research associates. Dr. Rubach earned his Bachelor of Arts from Princeton and his Doctor of Medicine from the University of Arizona College of Medicine. He completed his combined medicine pediatric residency at the University of Utah, his infectious disease fellowship at Duke, and his medical microbiology fellowship at the University of Utah. He also earned a Master of Science in Epidemiology from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He maintains board certifications in internal medicine, infectious diseases, and medical microbiology. As you can see from this introduction, we're very fortunate for Dr. Rubach to be here with us today, presenting on the title, Colonialism, Global Health, and Catholic Social Teaching, Notes from a Decade at Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Centre. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Warren, and thanks everyone. Is my audio coming in okay?
Yes, thanks.
Yep, good. And then is this looking full screen or is it presenter view? Just checking, are the slides up?
Yes, we can see them just right. Thanks.
Okay, great, great. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. For better or for worse, I will use PowerPoint to guide the progression of my talk. The official title, and thanks again for the kind introduction. The official title probably emphasizes more of an autobiographical concept. While I do provide a bit of my background and experience living and working in Tanzania, in reality, the focus of this seminar is, some reflections on the decolonizing global health movement and the ways in which cooperative social theory, the cooperative social theory known as Catholic social thought or teaching, might be able to contribute to the discourse. So here on this slide, I've half jokingly, provided some potential alternative titles for today's talk. If time remains at the end, I'd be happy to converse more about my experience, but it is kind of some reflections on decolonizing global health. Before jumping into the objectives and outline on the next slide, I think it's worth mentioning that I did choose this topic in early September 2023, before the events of October 7th and the ensuing war in Israel-Palestine. So I acknowledge I'm giving
the house still under cells.
I'm giving this talk on a topic, coloniality and decolonization, at a time when it's even more charged than it was 6 months ago, due to everything that's transpired since October 7th in Israel-Palestine, and all the contentious discourse that's been seen on campuses here in the U.S. So I just kind of acknowledge that, and from there, let's dive into it. So here's the talk's outline and objectives. I'll provide some brief background and history on Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Centre, commonly called KCMC, as well as history of Duke's collaborative partnership at KCMC, known as the KCMC Duke Collaboration or Health Collaboration. followed by a brief account of my professional and personal background. From there, I provide an ever so brief summary of some of the key tenets or threads seen in the decolonizing global health movement. And then much of the talk is dedicated to expounding on Catholic social teaching, which I will interchangeably also refer to as the social doctrine of the Church. I'll provide a brief history of the Church's social doctrine and try to articulate its key principles. Overall, I aim to give an appraisal, from a position of humility and with respect of the decolonizing global health movement, both its contributions and its potential or actual flaws. And then I think a key overriding thesis of my talk today is to raise awareness that the Christian tradition, in this case, the Catholic social teaching, provides a cooperative social theory in contrast to the antagonistic social theories that I think tend to dominate the decolonizing global health movement. Another way of saying this is that the Catholic social teaching, I think, can offer principles and perhaps an expanded vocabulary that can make positive contributions to the discourse on global health equity, which is the principal concern of the decolonizing global health movement. And in terms of vocabulary, I'm referring to principles in terms like the common good, the universal destination of goods, subsidiarity, solidarity, inviolability of human dignity. Those are all things we'll try to touch on in this talk. Now, some brief background on KCMC. KCMC is a 650-bed zonal referral hospital, meaning one of the 4 largest hospitals in Tanzania. These zonal hospitals serve as tertiary care centers. KCMC provides services in 11 medical specialties, including most of the key surgical subspecialties. At the next level down, the state or regional hospital, one could expect maybe a general surgeon, a pediatrician, and an internal medicine doctor on staff, and then basically general practitioners. At the district level, further down, generally you have general practitioners who've completed med school and 1 year of internship, some specialists in urban areas, and in more rural areas, you have a cadre of mid-level providers, such as clinical officers and assistant medical officers. So it's kind of specialty care and subspecialty care. KCMC certainly has colonial roots insofar as it was a cooperative initiative between the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Tanzania and European Lutheran churches. Initial fundraising and development began in 1961. KCMC is situated on 400 plus acres of land, which was donated by an American landowner. I don't know the particulars of land ownership at that time of the history of Tanzania, but that would be uncanny today for someone from America to own that much land in Tanzania. The hospital opened in 1971. It's managed by an entity called the Good Samaritan Foundation, which is an ecumenical church governance structure, rather. And much of the stake is the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Tanzania. KCMC has an academic arm, the Kilimanjaro Medical University College, founded in 1997, which is Tanzania's second medical school. Duke's collaborative partnership with KCMC began in 2001 at the invitation of the executive director of KCMC, Professor John Shao, with the mandate to conduct high-quality collaborative clinical research and to build local capacity for research at KCMC. Since its inception, the collaboration has had a research with service model as its mission. So the research enterprise should train local staff, that's clinically, scientifically, administratively. The focus of research topics should clearly improve patient care or public health and be relevant to local needs. And the collaboration, it should be authentic collaboration, true collaboration with interdependence and mutual benefit to both partners. This research with service model was articulated in the first decade of the collaboration. So what I've outlined above is not, an afterthought put in place, once the decolonizing movement emerged in the last 10 years or so. So the pillars of research at KCMC in the KCMC Duke collaboration has been HIV clinical trials, HIV cascade of care or engagement in care, what we nowadays could call implementation science surrounding HIV, and then febrile illness epidemiology, which is my area, and Warren already gave some introduction on the scope of that work. In the last 10 years, though, there's been a lot of growth in other areas, most especially trauma and road traffic accidents, as well as cancer care delivery. At present, there are about 12 Duke faculty with active research projects, and likewise around 14 or 15 Tanzanian investigators who are local collaborators on the research projects. The collaboration has been successful with over $62 million in grant funding. That's last tallied as of January 2023, mostly through the NIH. This includes 7 NIH D43 training grants, which offer professional development opportunities, has offered professional development opportunities to scores of trainees at KCMC. Again, as of the last time we tallied, this was January of last year, and at that time there was 59 trainees, mostly in master's level training, obtaining masters, a few obtaining PhDs. I think the number is now up to 8 probably, with 2 more pending. So a few PhDs, as well as some non-degree conferring training programs in clinical research. I'll wrap up this slide by pointing out that the KCMC Duke collaboration is not a separate legal entity. It's not a Duke in Tanzania. It is run within KCMC and managed by KCMC staff. At any point over the last 20 years, there's been 1 to 2 Duke faculty members on the ground and 1 Duke staff member. The rest are KCMC employees. Currently, our leadership is 1 Tanzanian site leader, director, and then 2 Duke faculty co-directors, myself and Dorothy Dow from Pediatrics. Briefly now on my background, I think some have joined late, but Warren's already given a good introduction on my medical training background, so I'll just leave that there and just come to the fact that I'm mostly a researcher. 90% of my time has been in research surrounding febrile illness, which has also been introduced by Warren. So I think I can jump to my clinical contributions. And so there, I would just highlight that I've worked as a clinician each Wednesday in HIV clinic. Precepting Tanzanian medical students, interns, and internal medicine residents, as well as providing direct patient care, in over 1,600 patient encounters. I've served as an attending physician on the general medicine ward at KCMC, usually 2 to 3 weeks per year, so not a huge clinical portfolio, but still a contribution nonetheless. And then I continued to serve as the medical director of the clinical research lab at KCMC. For the sake of time, I can't fully expand on how this role has clinical impact, but suffice to say that it has led to a rising tide of quality at the medical center when it comes to laboratory services, and also serves as a backup lab for patient testing when KCMC's primary lab can't perform the testing, which is, that's not infrequent in terms of its occurrence. So that's a bit of my professional background. In terms of my personal background and kind of characteristics and positionality, I am a Roman Catholic, a revert to Catholicism in late high school and early college. I do approach morality and moral action from a perspective of objective moral truth grounded in natural law and the dignity of the human person. So just probably worthwhile declaring those, and I acknowledge these positions are different from many of the positions held by the decolonization movement. Anyway, the last bullet point packages the previous 8 bullets into the parlance of decolonization. All of this is just to say that I am what Eugene Richardson in his book Epidemic Illusions would refer to, and he refers to himself as a privilege exerciser, a white upper middle class settler colonist. So just to put it in those terms. So now a few slides, I think, on some of the tenets of decolonizing global health. I don't claim to speak It's hard to put on 3 or 4 slides a comprehensive account, but nonetheless, some tenets or threads that I see. This is a highly cited article, and I think it articulates some key points of the movement. The first bullet is their call to action to repoliticize global health into a health justice framework that acknowledges how colonialism, racism, sexism, capitalism, and harmful isms pose the largest threat to health equity. They appropriately point to structural injustice, but notably with the language of structural violence and a reduction of a structural injustice to discriminatory practice. They posit that global health institutions, and I assume here the parentheses are for me, I think that means academic, government, and supergovernmental, such as the WHO, constitute a system that upholds the supremacy of the white savior. And the last bullet point is another call to action from the article to teach students about inequitable global disease burdens and inquiry into the racist and colonial histories that gave rise to these burdens. So it's a very powerful article in many ways, and certainly worth reading. Some additional tenets, these ones kind of get on positions that I've seen regarding knowledge and the human person. Eugene Richardson's assertion there's first the assertion from this Lancet article that says there are forms of knowledge that belong to white Western oppressors. Then the second bullet is from, again, Eugene Richardson, a decolonization maven at Harvard. His assertion about knowledge and the discipline known as epidemiology, which he characterizes as I think a lever of hegemony, where bourgeois empiricists build models based on assumptions conjured from the standpoint of dominant interest to conceal violently seized privilege. Sorry, I'm going to try to look to how do I want to get rid of the participants showing on the right in the tiles. Anyone with a recommendation on that? Apologies.
You should be able to click the X, Matt, to make that panel go away.
Okay, let's see.
Maybe just drag it off your screen. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I think it's better now. Thanks. Sorry for that. And then the last point is from a BMJ Global Health article that calls for deconstruction and dismantling of the concept of humanity, the uncoupling of man from human, and the unsettling of the hegemonic Western universalist conception of the human. It's well within civil discourse to question what they would call the epistemic authority of the concept of humanity that's been promoted by the West. It also makes assertions, but it also makes assertions against the universalist conception of the human. So in other words, sees reason to call into question the principle of the radical equality of human persons, which I think is the foundation of our human rights framework. So that's a notable claim or assertion. I can't expound much on this book for the sake of time, but it's just worth mentioning. It's probably worthy of its own talk. It's highly thought-provoking and articulate. It's very academic and bathed in critical theory and postmodern thought. And so while I probably would disagree with Eugene Richardson on many fundamental points about truth and knowledge that he asserts in this book, I could imagine that he'd be an amazing beer drinking buddy, though I have no idea whether or not he drinks beer. So definitely, something to put on the reading list if you have interest in this topic and haven't read his book already. So here I try to lay out some of my concerns about the decolonization movement, decolonizing global health movement specifically. But first to note the positive elements. I think it's been a powerful catalyst to do a sort of, put this in Christian terms, an examination of conscience, to acknowledge and address power dynamics in high-income country, low and middle-income country partnerships, to acknowledge privilege and the risk of a supremacist savior mentality, to examine and purify one's intentions and motivations. So that's that first bullet there. And then from an epistemology standpoint, how do we know what we know, and what do we know? I do think it's a healthy challenge to question what the movement would call Eurocentric epistemic authority. So there are things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that the more things in heaven, under heaven and earth, than are dreamt in your philosophies, as Shakespeare would say. So I think many positive things, but I do think there are contentions that are points for pause, and I actually found that many of my misgivings have already been well articulated in this article by, it's cited at the bottom there, Hellowell and Schwertl. So first would be antagonistic character. It has the potential, and for some, there's the explicit intention of to accentuate antagonisms between groups and even between nations. And so in that sense, it is basically some reincarnation of Marxist class struggle. I also worry that it has to the next bullet point of inadequate heuristic lens, that it's a bit reductionist, in that many seem to posit that colonialism and capitalism, as was pointed out in the first article I mentioned, are the chief explanations for disease burden and health inequality in the world. Next, I would say, is it's anchoring in critical theory, which manifests itself in knowledge as a power play, an epistemology of power, that positing that there are forms of knowledge and entire disciplines that belong to white Western oppressors, and that this oppressor class uses this knowledge or wields it to maintain domination. And then I guess finally, I worry about some, errant anthropology. Here I'm referring to there's sort of some dehumanizing and demeaning moves through social categorizations, oppressor and oppressed, that are based upon, quite explicitly in this literature on a person's skin pigmentation or her country of origin. And then finally, I'm also referring to strands in decolonizing thought that call for, as I showed on the previous or two previous slides, the dismantling of the universalist ideal in which all persons deserve equal moral consideration. I don't know why that figures into the polemic or the rhetoric and where that's headed, but again, these are just points for pause, stated with humility, and I'll now jump into Catholic social doctrine, but I've tried to just, I acknowledge that what I've put on the previous 4 slides is a broad characterization. I also acknowledge, as we move from that segment of the talk to the next segment, that of course, based on my background and my job, even many of my misgivings could be coming from, a place of just a defended posture. So all of that I readily admit, and I'm happy to discuss that further if time allows. But for now, let's move on to the social doctrine of the church, which I try to emphasize is a cooperative social theory, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. All right, so what is Catholic social teaching, and why might this body of teaching exist or be deemed necessary? It's part of the church's commission to proclaim the gospel, and part of that includes bearing witness in the name of Christ to humankind's dignity and the demands of justice and peace in conformity with divine wisdom. So it's seen as just part and parcel of the church's evangelizing mission. The church makes moral judgment about economic and social matters when, as quoted here in the Gaudium et Spes, Joy and Hope, the Vatican II document on the church in the world, when the fundamental rights of the person or the salvation of souls requires it. So here it's important to emphasize that the church, the Christian tradition, is proposing principles, criteria for judgment, guidelines for action. It is not prescriptive in terms of policies or wedded to specific political parties or political ideologies or schools. It's providing principles for critical evaluation, critical in the classical sense of the word. And it's a solidary humanism. So I'll read this quote from the compendium of the church's social doctrine. The church, the sign and history of God's love for mankind and of the vocation of the whole human race to unity as children of the one Father, intends with this document on her social doctrine to propose to all men and women a humanism that is up to the standards of God's plan of love in history, an integral and solidary humanism capable of creating a new social, economic, and political order founded on the dignity and freedom of every human person. So, basically the church is saying, and it's there at the bottom of the slide, that the love that we're called to live out in the world faces a vast field of work, and here are some principles to engage in that field. If anyone comes away from this talk wanting to learn and reflect more on these teachings, here's my plug for an excellent resource. This compendium can be purchased in paperback form. It's also available as a downloadable PDF at the link below on the Vatican website. So on this slide and the next one, I try to give a very brief history of Catholic social doctrine, the social teaching. Of course, so first is that it's as old as the New Testament. The social dimensions of Christian living. Our Lord himself expresses profound concern for the poor and marginalized. The Acts of the Apostles, the very early chapters, you're seeing the election of deacons by the church to tend to the widows in the community. And then, of course, throughout the history of the church, doctors of the church have articulated principles for Christian living in the world. Here I mention Augustine of Hippo, John Chrysostom, as well as Thomas Aquinas. But it's really in the 19th century with industrialization, the consolidation of this new industrial age and all the social upheaval wrought by those transformations, social and economic, that the Catholic Church begins to expound teachings to help Christians navigate these new realities. And it's Pope Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum, which means really on these new things, or on these new realities, where the church begins to clarify and highlight some key principles for the Christian faithful. So he asserts, as you can see in these bullet points, that socialism and atheistic communism are not viable or valid remedies for social injustice. He asserts a right to property. We'll come to reflect further on this, the right to property vis-a-vis the universal destination of goods. That'll be mentioned on the next slide. He asserts the right of the weak, the dignity of the poor, obligations of the rich, asserts the right of workers to form professional associations, i.e. unionize, so protecting workers' rights, safeguarding the worker from exploitation. And then again, it's a principle, emphasizing a principle of collaboration instead of class struggle as the means for social change. So that's 1892, Rerum Novarum. Subsequent teachings by the popes and the magisterium, you have Quadragesimo Anno, that's 40 years after Rerum Novarum, where Pope Pius XI emphasizes, again, respect for the freedom to form associations, workers' rights. Principles of solidarity and cooperation are the way forward to overcome social strife, and the principle of subsidiarity is articulated very explicitly, and we'll cover that on a subsequent slide. Pope John the 23rd, who convoked the Second Vatican Council, he has encyclicals that focus on economic growth, needs to be focused on promoting human dignity, and then the Second Vatican Council itself. In Gaudium et Spes, you see a personalism, an emphasis on the human person. So basically, to quote that document, everything is considered from the starting point of the person and with the view to the person. Society, its structures, and development must be oriented towards the progress of the human person. So it's a very personalist approach. Paul VI, in Populorum Progressio, here he treats on integral human development, the humane conditions that are required, and this concept of the universal destination of goods, which we'll talk about in subsequent slides. And then John Paul II, prolific writings on these social questions. He has several encyclicals that touch on things. The first, Laborem Exercens is on human work and the dignity of work and protection of workers. Solicitudo Res Socialis is that literally means the social concern. So again, more social teaching in these four documents here. The 100th year anniversary of Rerum Novarum in 1991, Centesimus Annus, and then Evangelium Vitae, which is on the value and inviolability of human life. So a real treasure trove of teaching in the last 130 years. So coming to the core principles, I've listed them here on this slide, and we're going to go through them in the subsequent slides. First and foremost is again the human person, her dignity, inviolability of human dignity. The common good. Under that, we'll give a slide that treats on this concept of the universal destination of goods. Solidarity, and within solidarity, I group in subsidiarity and responsibility, and of course, it probably goes without saying that these principles, the dignity of the human person, the common good, solidarity, they're all anchored in a natural law framework that is essential for asserting and safeguarding rights, and essential for providing ways for a moral evaluation of human action. So there's it's all kind of presupposed by that framework, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Kind of an obvious point. So the dignity of the human person, I think a fairly straightforward concept. Every human being has absolute value. Each human possesses an immaterial human soul. So that's the principle by which a natural philosopher would say the human has an inviolable dignity. Human life, because of human dignity, every person has a right to life. Human equality, the principle that we should treat each human with equal moral regard, irrespective of characteristics. So that's regardless of race, nation, sex, origin, culture, class, and then ability, frailty. And so these are key core principles, of course. And I think while these truths can be ascertained to a degree through reason and intellect, I think Plato or Aristotle ascertained some of these aspects of the human soul, the rational soul. I do think that Christian revelation clarifies and heightens the matter. So there's of course the Imago Dei, which one way I heard it expressed that resonates with me is there's something of God's glory that shines on the face of every human person, and so that's just part of the Christian revelation. And then the incarnation itself, of course, is a radical union by God with the entire human race. And you can, I think Galatians 3:28 articulates that most clearly, but I've listed some other New Testament verses that also hit home that point of our radical equality in Christ. So this emphasis on the dignity of the human person does have some footprint, albeit it's a relatively small footprint in the field of public health and ethics of global public health. This is a very nice article published in the Bulletin of the World Health Organization in 2008, which articulates a personalist approach to public health ethics. And so the key principles they highlight are here on the slide, that respect and defense of human life, the therapeutic principle that an intervention on life is justified if it has a therapeutic purpose, freedom and responsibility principle, that freedom must recognize respect for life as its objective limitation, sociality and subsidiarity principle, that achievements of the common good through individual well-being, are key goods that we should pursue. So a nice article, refreshing for me to discover that at any rate. Now we come to the common good, also a relatively commonsensical concept. So the common good is the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as a group or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. It stems from the dignity, unity, and equality of persons that we just talked about in the past two slides. It's predicated on respect for persons, for social well-being, and for the development of the group itself. It's a social and community dimension of the moral good. If an individual tries to be moral by doing good things and avoiding evil, well, this is analogous on a social societal plane, to do good socially. And I think, it's worth noting global health and the common good, they resonate, they align. Global health is aiming at worldwide improvement of health. It's that aspiration to quote Amartya Sen, that we strive for a world where humans are free from escapable illness, avoidable afflictions, and premature mortality. So the common good definitely aligns well, and probably very few people would argue about this concept of the common good. So within the common good, there's a principle that I think is worth reflecting on. It might be new to people, maybe it's old hat to some, but it has a beautiful dimension to it. It's called the universal destination of goods, and the first bullet kind of summarizes this as the whole of the world's resources are made to satisfy the whole of the world's needs. So it's saying that each person must have access to the level of well-being necessary for her full development. The church asserts that it's the right to common use of goods is the first principle, and that rights to property or free trade should be subordinated to this principle. It doesn't mean that everything is at the disposal of each person or all people, or that the same object may belong to each person or all people. So it's not collectivism, but it is saying that principle of sharing, of solidarity, is primary, has primacy over private property. Private property, that the church would say, is in fact, in its essence, only an instrument for respecting the principle of the universal destination of goods. It's an end. It's not an end, but a means to secure things so that people can have what they need for their full development. So in other words, property and the right to property should be used to serve human development and human flourishing. So to close here, this idea of the universal destination of goods, the church proposes as an invitation not to lose sight of the origin and purpose of goods, to bring about a world of fairness and solidarity, a positive function for the generation of wealth. So again, giving purpose. What is the purpose of generating wealth? Well, it should be for the good of the human person. And I think this concept also has important bearing, at least for me, as I think and reflect on, knowledge transfer. It's not just physical resources, but it's all resources, including knowledge or academic capital, human capital. And so, thinking about coloniality and responsibility and power dynamics, the universal destination of goods is a reminder of the importance to share our resources. Again, not as a savior, and certainly not as a white supremacist savior, but as a partner. Coming to solidarity. Solidarity is a moral and social virtue. It's a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. And to quote here John Paul II, it's a commitment to the good of one's neighbor with the readiness, in the gospel sense, to lose oneself for the sake of the other, instead of exploiting him, and to serve him instead of oppressing him for one's own advantage. Solidarity, the love of Christ compels us, as said in 2 Corinthians. I think it's easy to appreciate that solidarity really is a linchpin. It bonds together the common good, the universal destination of goods, the equality of human persons. All of that comes together and kind of acts through this moral and social virtue of solidarity. I realize it's a bit of a whirlwind here, but I hope you're staying with me. Now on to the principle of subsidiarity. And here, basically, it's asserted that it's wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish on their own and give to the community to accomplish. Similarly, a disturbance of the right order to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. So subsidiarity basically says that, it would be, to give examples, if it's something that the local school board can handle, then it shouldn't need to go to the state or to the federal level if it can best be adequately handled by those who are closest to the situation, if they have the wherewithal to do it. It protects people from abuses by higher level social authority and calls on higher level authorities to help individuals and the intermediate groups. So let's say, to keep this analogy going, state and county governments, municipal governments, those intermediate groups to fulfill their duties. So that's the principle of subsidiarity. And we don't have a ton of time left, though we are coming to the end of my slides. But I do think subsidiarity is a very important question when it comes to authentic partnership between high-resourced institutions and low-resource institutions in terms of capacity building. So in other words, that the principle of subsidiarity might help partners in global health discern when actions are paternalistic and patronizing, or when there's a necessary reality and subsidiarity assigns the task to the high-income partner, of course, with the overarching goal, like it says here in the last bullet, of installing the necessary resources in the low and middle income country partner, so that they have the growing capacity to accomplish tasks on their own. So I think subsidiarity is worth some consideration in the discussion of power dynamics between high income country institutions and low and middle income country institutions. So with solidarity, I think this is my last slide before getting to just some concluding remarks. Solidarity is oriented to the good of all and of each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. So it's that idea of taking responsibility, of acknowledging, recognizing our responsibility. The decolonizing global health movement is anchored in largely in critical theory, which is, of course, very fixated on power structures, the violence of power. And I think, for me at least, that causes me to reflect, well, what's the Christian sensibility of power? And for this, I highly recommend Romano Guardini. He's an esteemed 20th century theologian and a spiritual writer, and his essay Power and Responsibility, where basically he says that, yeah, we wield it with responsibility, what we might call stewardship in contemporary parlance. And this is essential to the human vocation, even God's remit to humans in the Garden of Eden. So responsible wielding of power, according to Guardini, I'm not going to be able to I'll refer you to the essay, but he kind of lays out some criteria. First is a realism, engaging with reality, not abstractions, not utopias or an idolatry of man. That if we get the power structures right, everything will work. If we reassign power accordingly. So just being real in the situations. He articulates a need for command of self. That there's no greatness without self-control. So asceticism, basically, what he calls the liberating power that lies in self-control. Humility. So he has beautiful passages about just the incarnation as really this process of power, ultimate pluripotent power converted to humility. And he calls humility the inmost secret of Christianity, or the vital power of Christianity. The next one, acceptance of absolute demands. Basically there he's trying to say, see the essence of things and do the right that it demands. So calling a spade, he's basically, this is a response to kind of, I think, what he would call extreme existentialism, that there are essential values. You can call a spade a spade. To wield power responsibly, we need to be willing to say that this is right or wrong, and act accordingly. And then the last one, quotidian, meaning kind of daily, just the daily grind, acts of justice and upholding dignity of each person you encounter. So, he talks about the doctor with the patient, the farmer doing his farming, the teacher teaching students, and kind of reflects, is it really clear to us, this is a quote, is it really clear to us in each concrete process what the decisive intention and attitude was, and what is direct and what is the indirect and direct result? Was the truth in each case protected, its particular validity trusted? Did the person encountered go away feeling that he had been treated with dignity, that he had been received as a person by a person? Did that other appeal to his freedom, to all that is vital and creative in him? So it's just to say it's this idea of just, as you go, you uphold the dignity of each interaction you have with folks, and ultimately he concludes the book saying, or the essay, that the fate of humanity lies in our daily actions and interactions. So that's a bit on kind of a meditation, if you will, on responsibility. But I think the take home is that Christians shouldn't cower away in these discussions about power and power dynamics. And I think there's a tradition, including Christianity's contribution of humility to world thought. There is humility in Eastern thought, but it's different than Christ's humility. And so there's plenty to offer in these discussions, and power is something, obviously it's a platitude from Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, but with great power comes great responsibility. But yeah, essentially that idea that we shouldn't cower away from it. This is our field, and we need to work in it. All right, so some conclusions and summary thoughts. In terms of important contributions, as stated previously, I think the decolonizing global health movement has been a powerful catalyst. This examination of conscience, this jarring reminder and call to awareness of power dynamics and privilege, to examine rectitude, to have rectitude of intention, examine your motivations, examine gain, essentially ask yourself, am I exploiting in any way situations or persons or institutions? So I think there's very, very healthy challenges there. Acknowledge privilege and the risk of that supremacist savior mentality, which can lead to exploitation. And again, this healthy challenge to of course, it's calling for shifts in power distribution and power, and that's right and appropriate. And again, we could invoke the principle of subsidiarity there in terms of stakeholders, but also shifts in knowledge and the idea of multi-directional knowledge rather than unidirectional knowledge coming from Western medicine down the gradient. So I think there's a lot of healthy challenges in it. I've also already tried to articulate many, these are just summarizing or restating the concerning elements, or what I would see as the concerning elements. And I by no means think that the audience here, that I will not assume that anyone in the audience agrees with me about these concerns. So I'm just, I have no pretensions. I might be a lone wolf here, I guess. But nevertheless, I think it stems from critical theory and a neo-Marxist positionality. There's this lens that views the world through antagonisms, and I'm just not sure that lens adequately or appropriately explains the majority of human interaction or even of human history. It's important, even dominant at certain times of history, but I don't know that it's the lens in which we need to view and approach all the world's problems through. There's this dehumanizing objectification of basically large swathes of humanity, chiefly by their skin color or what country they were born in. So that I find problematic. It renders cooperation either as an action that should be severely suspected, if not altogether impossible. So that I find problematic. Some practitioners, proponents, will purport that violent means are justified to achieve the noble end of decolonization. There's definitely a rhetoric of violence in a lot of this literature, and we've also seen that with the Israel-Palestine in the last 6 months. And then kind of a little bit more philosophically is this knowledge gap. I think on the previous slide I kind of said that I think there is some wonder and beauty in the idea of multiple perspectives bearing down on truth. So that's one of the healthy challenges that it's brought. but then there's this these assertions that you see in this movement of basically that objective knowledge is not possible. It's conditioned by everyone's position and agenda. So to the point of invalidity, especially if you're using Eurocentric tools, it's the knowledge is invalid by virtue of an ulterior agenda of domination or hegemony. And then again, kind of a similar dynamic is this. It basically questions altogether abilities to make true observations. So these are some of my concerning things that I would view as concerning elements. Against those, I've tried to articulate something of an alternative, or at least a body of knowledge that can expand the vocabulary and provide options for a cooperative social theory. And so, meaning I've tried to articulate Catholic social teaching and what bearing it can, and I would argue should, have on the discourse about global public health, health equity, and decolonization. So just a quick recap here. The social teaching of the Catholic Church upholds the dignity of the human person. Again, everything is considered from the starting point of the person and with a view to the person. And all that we do should be oriented towards the progress of the human person. This social doctrine rejects the class struggle or divisive categories of oppressor-oppressed as the explanatory lens for the world's problems. Again, it's cooperative and affirming of common humanity. It's not antagonistic. It does not dehumanize or objectify groups of people. There's the emphasis on the common good, which aligns with the goals of global health. And we didn't talk about this much in this talk, but it can accommodate consequentialist approaches, meaning maximizing good, so long as the integrity and dignity of persons are not violated. So, you can't undertake an evil mean to achieve a good end. That's never justified. I've articulated the principle of the universal destination of goods, that all goods, including our intellectual, our IP, is at the service of the human person. And ultimately, it's a posture of gospel imbued values and virtues. Again, those daily acts of justice that Guardini talks about, the manifestations of solidarity, partnership, stewardship, service, and humility. So that's what I have. Sorry, it went a bit longer than I had hoped, but I hope this was somehow a contribution to these conversations that we're having in the academy. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for that really detailed and helpful description of Catholic social teaching. We have just a few minutes for questions. I see one that's already come up in the Q&A, and I'll highlight that in just a minute. I would encourage you either to post questions in the Q&A, or you're welcome to go to the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen and raise your hand, and I'll call on you in order. Matt, just one question that I have, just to kind of put into perspective some of the things that you talked about, but to make it more personal for your work specifically at KCMC. So you've mentioned that the decolonial discourse actually is helpful in helping us to think about positions of power, and you've given Guardini and responsibility and humility as a kind of alternative way to think about that. I just wonder, in your own work at KCMC or affiliated with Duke and your connection to KCMC, where you do have a position of leadership and responsibility, like how in your own life does this work out, and how do you attend to questions of structures and power? How do you seek the kind of humility that you're describing and talk about? Tell us practically what that means for you as a researcher, as a clinician, as an administrator, in the specific context there.
Sure. No, thanks, Warren. I think one is in mentoring. I've mentees, including Tanzanians who now have K Awards, still based at K Awards 2 KCMC, so Career Development Awards. And I would say just that fiduciary responsibility to do right by my mentees, whether it's a Tanzanian MD study coordinator or a junior scientist. And so just living that out well as a mentor would be one way. Giving back clinically would be another way. And after reading, Eugene Richardson's book, epidemiology, so I just kind of said, oh, well, at least I'm involved in clinical care delivery. So when I have that beer with Eugene Richardson, he won't rake me over the coals on that one. But jokes aside, just in other words, there's a million things going on Wednesday mornings, and there's always the temptation of, do I really need to go to clinic? But to kind of power through and contribute clinically brings a realness to the partnership, I would say. Those are some initial thoughts. There's also just the way things are structured. I mentioned that the collaboration is run through KCMC, the bank account, so that has implications for who sees and signs the checks. You know what I mean? So there's that comes with a level of transparency and partnership, trust, and engagement. So those are some almost administrative design things that I inherited from the previous faculty directors, but I think we're quite prescient and well thought out. I don't know if that's something of an attempt at an answer.
Thank you. Yeah. I want to honor the question that's been posted, so I'll add a follow-up to my own and then ask this together, and you can respond to either or both as you wish. But a question to me is, like, how do we collectively allow ourselves to be open to others' critiques, to others' perspectives? Like, how do we make ourselves open to the critique and judgment of others, maybe specifically around questions of power? How does that work for you personally, individually, and you're there? And then I do want to add the question that's been posted. Is there any way for a country like Tanzania to be independent of, the questioner says, Rome-based or US-based institutions without neo-Marxist philosophies and strategies?
Sure, I agree. I mean, I guess I even saw recently a slide from a Southern Voice, a Global South Voice at the CUGH. It's the University Consortium of University Global Health Program, something like that, where it said, you've invented this idea of colonialism. Now you've invented decolonialism, and we just want to be partners, is kind of what it says. And when you read that, that kind of that resonated with me. That can't we? Isn't there enough that we could forge on? It doesn't have to be these collision of worlds or these collisions of thought streams. It can just be cooperation. So I think there could be. I mean, Cody, it's a great thought and great question. I think there are others probably in this room that spend more time thinking about positionality and so it gets back to some of these questions I brought up: is can there be real disinterested human exchange, or is everything colored and conditioned by my white privilege, as an example? And so I would say, there can be real disinterested human exchange, and it doesn't need to come from Rome or Cambridge, Massachusetts. It can just be humans trying to achieve things. And I think that's one of my big problems with the decolonizing strife narrative, is that just most of human history is a story of cooperation, of certainly tons of violence, tons of war, domination. It's a fallen world, but the good that we've constructed has been through cooperation, and those are people just working in the factory. They're not thinking about the violence of power and language and principles of subsidiarity. They're just trying to get things done and put food on the table and a roof over their heads in a cooperative, collaborative way. So I think fundamentally the answer is yes. I think most of the academy would say no way in hell. Everyone's got their agenda. So those are some thoughts for me. I don't know if that's fair or helpful. And then Warren, I realize we're past time, but your question, I guess it was, I don't know. I mean, I would be the first to admit that an initial reaction is to be very defended. Of course, I'm very conflicted, in anything that I've kind of given a disclaimer for this talk, that anything I've shared could just be me in a defended posture. So I don't know. But I think it probably ultimately stems to humility, and at least for me, I would say humility and interior life. So kind of those rituals, those daily activities, where you're placing yourself in the presence of God. Whatever your tradition is, whether it's a daily examination of conscience and time of time of mental prayer and reflection. So I think having that interiority can help, can be helpful to receive critique or to entertain these other thoughts or ideas. So in other words, it can instill humility, I guess. That's at least what occurs to me off the top of my head. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Rubach, for being with us today. Thank you for the thoughtfulness of your presentation. We really appreciate your presence here. Thanks to all of you who've attended this session today, and also to the other Theology, Medicine, and Culture seminars this semester. This is our last seminar for the spring semester, but we will be restarting in the fall, and we look forward to seeing you then. So thanks to all of you for being here today. Go in peace and take care. Thank you.